All right, good evening. I want to welcome everybody to this Finance Committee meeting. It is Tuesday, March 26th. I am Katie Logan Hedges, Chair of the Finance Committee. With me this evening, we have committee members Jeff Hallinan and Tom Duval. We also have three members of council, the mayor, the auditor, and I want to welcome Tim Colburn with P3, as well as Glenn Reeser, who is the city appointee for the JED board, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the agenda. We will go ahead and, like I said, call the meeting to order. Melissa, can we please do a roll call?
Hedges.
Here.
Hallinan.
Here.
Duval.
Here.
Thank you. So all members are present. Melissa sent out the minutes from the last Finance Committee meeting that we had on February 6th. Were there comments, questions, corrections on those minutes?
Look good.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Go ahead. I will.
Motion by Jeff Hallinan,
I'll second.
seconded by Tom Duval. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. All right, that takes us to the new business portion of the agenda. So these two fine gentlemen came to the council meeting last Tuesday with some JED updates, and this is kind of the follow-up to that discussion. So I'm going to invite one of you, Mr. Reeser, I think you're getting appointed. If you could kind of just give us an explanation of sort of where we are. With the agenda that was sent out was the original JED agreement in its entirety to the members of council, so they've seen that, as well as the ordinance that will be forthcoming after this discussion. So welcome, Tim Colbert.
Thank you, Katie. So I think everybody, maybe but one council member was here for the education session, so I'll just put it out there. If there are follow-up questions or anything you thought of between the last week and this week, let's use this evening to continue that conversation. So Circleville and Pickaway Township are parties to the Circleville Pickaway Township JED. I refer to it as the Sofidel JED because that was the project we incorporated that body to do. We've used the city's income tax and utilities and infrastructure in that area to attract what will be 600 jobs with the announced Sofidel expansion last week. They have $185 million in their expansion plus their original investment. Our main function to date has been to put a gas line in the ground to serve Sofidel. That gas line is getting to the point where its loan to build and construct will be forgiven. And one thing we educated you on is we will have additional resources because of that we will need to consider to use. Additionally, Mark and Glenn on the JED board have worked to identify some housekeeping challenges. The percentages that the parties split the revenue got out of whack between the city of Circleville and Logan Elm, if that's correct, Mark?
That's correct.
And the legislation you've seen in front of you works to correct that actually rather quickly so that we can get back on track. Mark, anything you want to go into details about that legislation?
Yeah, I'll try and keep it as simple as I can, but basically what this legislation does is when the JED was originally set up, it was set up with the understanding that the JED would be paying 3% of the revenue to RETA to be able to pay for the tax, to do tax collections. That 3% actually went to the city of Circleville first, and then we paid RETA. Well, every year there was getting a refund from RETA because RETA never actually charged 3%. It was always lower than that. So every year we were getting a refund, and that was going straight back to Circleville instead of being divvied back up to the other participants in the JED. So basically, what happened was instead of Circleville getting the 4% and Logan Elm getting 4%, Circleville is getting 4% and plus whatever was not spent on the RETA tax collection cost. So that ended up over many years, over 6 years, coming to about $30-some thousand. And basically what this does is this will stop the payments to the city of Circleville until we are equal to where Logan Elm is. So basically it's a $30-some thousand to catch up for them to be put whole, and that was based on the board's decision that they felt like that was the proper thing to do once it was found out that the city was getting more back than what Logan Elm was getting.
And the legislation that you've seen, the ordinance, the adjustment was reviewed by the JED board and supported unanimously to get this corrected, but we obviously need to come before you and Pickaway Township to correct this matter. And Council Finance Chair Katie Logan Hedges, would you like me to go into any of future things that we are? Yeah.
So we'd like a little bit of that, Tim, but also if you could speak to just the forgiveness part. There was a question regarding essentially why it's being forgiven. I don't know if you could share that just so everybody's on the same page with that as well.
Yeah, so simple answer, because we could do it. Sofidel's expansion, they came to the state and said, we are ready to invest, add a third paper line. And it's going to more than, if you have 3 paper lines, you would think you're increasing production 30%. They will produce much more raw material, and they've added converting capacity to convert tissue paper, rolls of tissue paper into individual cartons. And so there'll be a lot more capacity added than just 30%. But because Sofidel came with the request to the state and ultimately to Pickaway County to expand, we had an opportunity to say, we want Phase 1 loan forgiven. And that was part of the incentive package. And Sofidel liked it. If you remember, it's roughly $20 million to put the gas line in the ground. Sofidel had a small portion of that, about $3.5 or $4 million, but they also were the guarantor of the loan. So why did they want it forgiven? Well, because that guarantee goes away. And why did we want to forgive it? Because we no longer have to pay the state back for that loan. And that forgiveness ends up with a corpus of principle that the JED can use, one of the future items I'd like to talk about. But that is why. Because Sofidel asked, we were brave enough, confident enough in Sofidel's experience over the first 4 years that we could ask the state for that forgiveness, and it came through. I have the loan forgiveness documents are in draft, and we will see them well before 1/1/25 when we anticipate that loan to be forgiven.
Okay.
Helpful?
Yeah, that's very helpful. I appreciate it. Before, Tim, you go into kind of potentially the next phase, questions from the committee for Tim regarding any of this? Council members?
No, thank you.
Okay. Okay, by all means, if you want to share.
Well, the Sofidel success, the gas line forgiveness allows us to have a corpus of dollars. Once we figured out in late 21, early 22 that they would expand, we stopped making additional principal payments to down pay the loan. We made minimum payments, and we took and invested those funds in increasing interest rates. And today we have one CD is still at 4.7. All others are at 5% or better. Those maturity dates are at the end of this year, early next year, aligned with the loan forgiveness. But that money will then be able to be used by the parties to the JED. Based on Sofidel's success, it's made us look at what are the boundaries of the JED. And today it is just property that the Sofidel plant is on. But there are other developable sites, acreage, both on the Sofidel side of 23 and on the DuPont side of 23. And so conversations the JED board is having with Glenn and Mark Martin and the other parties is what kind of planning could we do in that area to understand how those sites could be used, how they might be incorporated into the JED in the future, what are the pipelines and power lines and gas lines, and what's in the ground today, what would we need in the future to support business. And this could be a very good thing for Circleville as a party to the JED in an area that you typically, is not within your typical city boundaries. Mm-hmm. It is this JED phenomena where you're benefiting some percentage of the JED revenue back into the city for, non-incorporated Circleville. So that's a little bit about expansion of the JED, studying and researching what the JED should look like, which parcels it should include, and what assets it has. I think those are the two biggest things. Let's plan, and let's figure out the size. I'll give you an example. Maybe we should have seen this coming, through all things you learn, and then it's a measure of what you do with that learning. We, through TIF dollars, tax increment financing, through Sofidel's success, we also put all the roads, or Sofidel's commitments to bring jobs here. We put roads off of 23. The truck stop went in. Restaurants and businesses went in there. But we have a new business. Bain Welker has moved to that end of town. They are not a member of the JED. That parcel is not in the JED. But we do have employees using assets and infrastructure the JED has built and customers using their business. And we just need to be cautious or considerate of which parcels are in the JED and how the JED's resources benefit that business and how the business benefits the JED. And maybe we missed that opportunity. All right, well, let's learn from it and figure out what other acreage and parcels. And so that the JED board is contemplating that as we speak.
Okay, that's helpful to know. When and if a decision is made like that to potentially expand it, that would come back through council for further review, obviously, but
Yeah, the JED gave direction, asked me to outline the process. And you know, this is the country we live in, has property rights and freedoms, and thank God for that. So there is a process, and we have to go through a diligence process with the property owners and with the parties of the JED. And clearly, Circleville is a party of that JED, as is Pickaway Township, and we'll have to come back here as well to the township.
And so just as, again, for those who maybe were not here last week, the JED board is composed of a representative from the city who is the beneficiary, a representative from the school district of Logan Elm as a beneficiary, and then, of course, the township. So again, that's where Mr. Reeser falls in for us. Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, if I may make just a couple.
Absolutely.
Getting
Please do.
back to the legislation that's before you tonight, there's a second aspect to it that some of you might be a little confused about, but there's another part of it that's going to be in the second, and that has to do with the abatement of property tax. And that will also change how the money is distributed again. And this legislation, the attorneys have looked at this, made an attempt to address that particular issue. Because when that comes off, when the property tax abatement comes off, then the school district will receive quite a bit more because they get the lion's share of property tax anyway, as you well know. And that has been addressed in here as well. If somebody has a question about how that will work. It changes the distribution numbers quite a bit, as you probably have already seen. And that's a ways out yet. I think, I'm not sure exactly how many years, probably more than 6 or 7.
Oh, yeah, it's closer to 2040.
2040, so that's a long way out. And this legislation, I guess, you know, we said just try to attack as many problems as we possibly can at one time. And there may be something else comes up, who knows? But right now, it looks like that's going to address both issues, one that Mark just described in detail and the property tax abatement that's down the road quite a ways. So that's why it's in there.
Yep, thank you. Thank you for that. Questions, again, for the committee? Other council members, questions?
No.
Gentlemen, anything else you want to add?
I think appreciate your support. The JED board is you know, there's a lot of places I've gotten to work in the community. The Pickaway Township JED board, Harrison Township JED board are fun and exciting places to work because we're doing good things for the community. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your work on this. Okay, if there is not further questions, Melissa, can we go ahead and read the ordinance for us?
An ordinance approving the First Amendment to the agreement to create the City of Circleville Pickaway Township Joint Economic Development District to authorize the redistribution of JED income tax revenue and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. So having read the ordinance and listened to the presentation before us tonight, further questions, comments? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to forward this to council at our next meeting, which would be April the 2nd,
So there's a motion on the
with
floor.
recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Motion on the floor from Mr. Hallinan to forward on to council on April 2nd with a recommendation for passage. Is there a second?
I second.
Seconded by Mr. Duval. Melissa, can we please do a roll call?
Hedges,
Yes?
Hallinan.
Yes.
Duval.
Here, yes.
Thank you very much. We will forward that on to council on April 2nd. Okay, next on the agenda is other business. We had asked, Mr. Keller and I had asked the mayor to come with some information regarding the safety levy, and some financial information regarding that, so I will turn that over to her.
Yeah, so for you all may remember that in November of 2019, the citizens of Circleville passed the safety levy 61% to 38%. We put that back on the ballot again in November with a 45 for and a 54% fail. Just 2 weeks ago, or last week, we put it back on the ballot, and there were 1,265 votes for the levy, and there were 1,346 votes against the levy. So as Councilperson and Finance Chair Katie Logan Hedges indicated, President Keller, her, and myself talked about this last week in terms of what this looks like for us in the future. This last attempt at getting the safety levy passed was a reduction from 0.5 to 0.4 in that safety levy, which was different than what we had placed on in 2019, but the same that we had put on in November. Unfortunately, it did not pass. So what is our plan moving forward? And so the plan is to review all options. At the end of 2023, the auditor sent out the statement of cash for that, for all accounts, but specifically in the 227, which is the fund that comes from. There was $1,027,753 in that account. And so at this point, the decision needs to be made to put that levy on the ballot again. This money pays for our safety forces salaries. It pays for equipment. And so with the full support of myself as a council member and finance chair before I sat in this seat, that support continues as the mayor. And so I ask that council, the finance committee and council consider how we move forward to put this on the ballot again. I will say that local questions need to be to the Board of Elections by August the 7th of this year in order to be considered for the November ballot. So that's what I have.
I'll just make a comment. So, yeah, last week, Katie, as finance chair, and myself met with the mayor. We talked about the levy results. I challenged the mayor that she needs to work with her police and fire departments, the chiefs, to talk about a plan that they will support, she will support, and bring back to council with a proposal to the finance committee on what that levy should look like. We got a little bit of time, not a lot of time, and I think we kind of, she'll take your input if you've got thoughts or comments, but it really needs to be driven by the mayor's office on down through the safety forces. And we'll await her proposal to come back to committee on what that levy will look like for this coming November. And so we challenged her to do that.
Questions from the committee? Council? Okay, so we will wait for that information to come back. I will speak a little bit to prior in our efforts to get the levy passed. Mr. Bidwell, the auditor, shared some information, and essentially, and please correct me if I'm misrepresenting this, but it essentially cuts the safety forces in a third from a financial standpoint. So please keep that in mind as we explore options going forward if it doesn't pass this fall, what that would look like for the city of Circleville as well as the residents in which we serve.
To
Mr.
clarify,
Duval.
is that cut it by a third or to a third?
It's, my understanding was by a third.
By a third, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions from anyone? Is there any additional business to discuss?
Motion to adjourn.
Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to
Here's my
adjourn.
chance.
Motion by Jeff
I
Hallinan,
know, you looked at me.
I was
second,
ready to go.
Mr. Duval.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Duval. We are adjourned at 6:19.